Hello, learners. This is JC Maluleka, your teacher. I am putting a voice on these notes with the hope that maybe it will be better for you. You'll understand better when you are reading through them with my voice on them. I want you to pay special attention to the themes because I will also add them, and I also want you to put special attention to the summary notes. You've got an overview, but you can even skip the overview. You can, because it's a summary of a summary. It just tells you what is in the book. But just go to the acts, Act 1, from Act 1 up to Act 5, and to the scenes as well, and also to the themes. I believe that this will be more helpful because I've put my voice on it. Please press on the recording with the you see with the audio sign there, ne? And then listen. Learners, as you know, the major conflict in Hamlet is that of Hamlet's vengeance for his father. He's not sure if he should go ahead with it. He has his doubts because he doesn't know whether he can trust this ghost, or this ghost is just a spirit pretending to be his father. And at the same time, King Claudius, who is his uncle, who has murdered his father, is now a king and thus well protected, and it would be difficult even for him to carry out the murder. So that is the major conflict in Hamlet. King Hamlet has died. Claudius is now the king. He's the uncle of Hamlet, the son of King Hamlet. He has married Queen Gertrude, the mother of Hamlet. The king appears as a ghost, and several people see it. And then we hear how Prince Hamlet, the son of King Hamlet, is angry about the fact that his mother married very quickly after the death of the father. And we later hear how King Hamlet asks Hamlet to stay in Denmark and not go back to school. But we know that he wants to keep an eye on him. Polonius, the king's counselor, and Lytus, they warn Ophelia against her relationship with Hamlet because Hamlet is royalty and Ophelia is a commoner. And they do not believe that a relationship between them can be successful. The ghost tells Hamlet that he is the ghost, he is the spirit of his father, and that he wants Hamlet to avenge his death. Hamlet is not sure about what the ghost told him, so he puts some plans in place. First, he acts like he's mad so that he can watch his uncle and see if he will, give out any information, uh, thinking that Hamlet is mad and doesn't see. At the same time, later on, when a group of actors come to Elsinore, the palace, he asks them to um, perform a play that has events that are similar to the killing of King Hamlet, to see if Claudius will not react when these are acted in front of him. And then when they do, Claudius is shocked and panics, and then Hamlet is now sure of what the ghost told him. And now he wants to kill the king, but when he finds him praying, decides that he will wait for when he is in sin, because if he kills him praying, then he's going to go directly to heaven, and that is not what he wants. He decides to confront his mother And then during that time, because Polonius was with his mother in the bedroom and hiding behind a curtain, um, and Hamlet thinks Polonius is Claudius, Polonius gets killed behind that curtain. When the king finds out that Polonius has been killed by Hamlet, he decides to pretend to help him by sending him to England with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. He gives them a letter ordering them to kill the prince in England. But on the way, Hamlet finds out about that. In the meantime, Ophelia becomes mad because not only has she lost Hamlet, but also her father was killed by Hamlet himself. Hamlet returns to Denmark. Claudius then plans a duel between Hamlet and Lytus. Lytus is looking for revenge for his father's death and then finds out that it is Hamlet because he thought it was Claudius who killed his father, only to find that it's Hamlet. So then now they have to fight to the death. Claudius poisons the sword that is used by Lytus so as to make sure that Hamlet will definitely die. Ophelia drowns in a pond. It is believed that she has taken her life. Then later on, Hamlet and Horatio are at the graveyard where Ophelia's coffin arrives. Hamlet and Lytus fight. Hamlet accepts the fainting contest that he will fight with Lytus later on in the feud. The king offers Hamlet a poison to drink, but he does not take it during the time when they are fighting. The queen drinks it and dies. Hamlet is wounded with a poisoned sword, and Hamlet wounds Lytus with the same sword. As Lytus is dying, he tells Hamlet that the king is to blame for the poisoned sword and the poison in the cup. Hamlet stabs the king and forces him to drink from the cup, and so everybody dies. Passes the throne to Fortinbras, who arrives to Denmark to conquer it. And so the king of Denmark becomes Fortinbras. I want you to listen to the summary thoroughly. This is just an overview. So an overview is not as detailed as the summary. I want you to give yourself time to go through the summary. I'm trying to help you by putting my voice on these slides. I'm also going to put my voice on the themes. I want you to, before you come tomorrow, to just give yourself time to go through this. All right. Okay, now I'm going to give you the plot. What is a plot? A plot is the storyline, how the story begins, how it proceeds, how it ends. I'm just going to give the story from Act 1, how Act 1 starts, Act 2, Act 3, Act 4, and Act 5. And then after that, you will get the other things. But first, let's look at the plot. In Act 1, a ghost resembling the late King Hamlet is spotted on a platform before Elsinore Castle in Denmark. King Claudius, who now rules Denmark, has taken King Hamlet's wife, Queen Gertrude, as his new wife and Queen of Denmark. The ghost speaks to Hamlet, declaring ominously that it is indeed his father's spirit, and that he was murdered by Claudius, ordering Hamlet to seek revenge on the man who usurped his throne and married his wife. The ghost disappears with the dawn. As we know from reading the play, we know that the ghost would appear at 12 midnight and then at dawn it would disappear. Let's go to the next act, Act 2. Polonius has his own theory about Hamlet's transformation. It is caused by Hamlet's love for his daughter Ophelia. This transformation is when Hamlet pretends to be mad, but no one knows that he's pretending. So Polonius has his own theory. He believes that it is because Hamlet is really in love with his daughter and his daughter is no longer with Hamlet and Hamlet has not taken it well. Polonius decides to tell King Claudius the reason for Hamlet's recently odd behavior. In Act 3, a group of traveling actors comes to Elsinore, and Hamlet seizes upon an idea to test his uncle's guilt. He will have the players perform a scene closely resembling the sequence by which Hamlet imagines his uncle to have murdered his father, so that if Claudius is guilty, he will react. By the way, the ghost told Hamlet that when the king was sitting in his orchard, King Claudius came and whilst he was sleeping, poured poison in his ear. But everyone in Denmark believes that the king was killed by a snake. But the snake that is on the throne is the one that killed him. Hamlet goes to kill Claudius but finds him praying. Since he believes that killing Claudius while in prayer would send Claudius' soul to heaven, Hamlet considers that it would be an inadequate revenge and decides to wait. Hamlet goes to confront his mother, in whose bedchamber Polonius has hidden behind a tapestry. Hamlet believes the king is hiding there and kills Polonius. 4. King Claudius learns of Polonius' murder, which shocks him and decides to send Hamlet away to England with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern immediately. King Claudius reveals his plan for Hamlet to be killed in England. Ophelia goes mad from the grief of losing her father and drowns in the river. Lytus wants to take revenge for his father's murder, and King Claudius explains to him that Hamlet killed his father. In Act 5, Hamlet explains to Horatio how he avoided the death planned for him in England and had courtiers Rosencrantz and Guildenstern put to death instead. Hamlet fights Lytus. Hamlet wins the first 2 rounds against Lytus, but is stabbed and poisoned fatally in the 3rd round, exchanging swords whilst fighting. Hamlet wounds and poisons Lytus, who explains that his sword is poison-tipped. Now dying, Hamlet stabs King Claudius with this same sword, killing him. Hamlet dying tells Horatio to tell his story. Hamlet recommends young Fortinbras as the next king of Denmark. Horatio promises to tell all the story we have just witnessed, ending the play. And Act 5 is the end of the play. Since you know that all of Shakespeare's plays have 5 acts. So it ends with Fortinbras becoming the king, young Fortinbras that we met at the beginning of the play. Important faces or times in Hamlet. We have the introduction where a ghost is seen by the guards at Elsinore Castle. Then in the rising action, the ghost appears to Hamlet and tells Hamlet to revenge his murder. Hamlet pretends to be mad so that he can find out whether his father was really killed by King Claudius. Hamlet then later on stages a mousetrap play to catch King Claudius, to observe him, to see if King Claudius will act guiltily when he sees this play. And then Hamlet, when he's now supposed to kill King Claudius, after being sure that King Claudius is guilty, Hamlet does not kill the king because he finds him praying and he does not want to kill him while he's praying because his soul will go directly to heaven, whereas the soul of his father is not in heaven. Let's go to the climax. The climax is the most hectic part of the play. Hamlet stabs Polonius through the arras in Act 3, Scene 4. He commits himself to overtly violent action and brings himself into unavoidable conflict with the king. He kills Polonius because he thinks that Polonius is King Claudius. He's not aware that the person behind the arrows is Polonius. Another possible climax comes at the end of Act 4, Scene 4, when Hamlet decides to commit himself fully to violent revenge. He decides that now he's just going to do it. He is um, not going to let anything stop him this time because he has been hesitant all along. First, because he wanted to be sure that the ghost had told him the truth and that it was not just the spirit wanting to turn him into a murderer, I mean. And then now that he's sure, he commits himself to violent revenge, especially now that he has even killed Polonius by mistake and not the right person. And especially now that he really is sure that King Claudius murdered his father. We have the following action. This is when Hamlet is now sent to England to be killed. King Claudius is pretending to be helping him, but he has planned that he's going to get him killed in England. Hamlet returns to Denmark and confronts Lytus at Ophelia's funeral. And then later on, the fencing match or the duel happens. And then everyone in the royal family dies, starting with Gertrude drinking a poisoned chalice um, poisoned by King Claudius, poisoning it for Hamlet, and she drinks it. She's the one who drinks it. And then the poisoned sword that Lytus uses on Hamlet, and then they kill each other, and then they kill, and then Hamlet kills King Claudius as well, after finding out that he poisoned the chalice and he poisoned the sword. As he dies, he kills him as well. Now, Lenas, this part here, from here, this is a detailed summary of Hamlet from Act 1, Scene 1, up to the last act and the last scene. I am hoping that with my voice, you will hear it better than when you read it. So let's go. Act 1, Scene 1. On a dark winter night outside Elsinore Castle in Denmark, an officer named Bernardo is on guard. Shortly thereafter, Bernardo is joined by Marcellus, another watchman, and Horatio, a friend of Prince Hamlet. Bernardo and Marcellus have urged Horatio to stand watch with them because they believe they have something shocking to show him. They discuss the apparition they have seen for the past 2 nights and which they now hope to show Horatio, the ghost of the recently deceased King Hamlet, which they claim has appeared before them on that castle ramparts in the late hours of the night. Horatio is skeptical. He does not believe in ghosts. But then the ghost suddenly appears before the men and just as suddenly vanishes. Terrified, Horatio acknowledges that the spectre does indeed resemble the dead king of Denmark. Horatio declares that the ghost must bring warning of impending misfortune for Denmark, perhaps in the form of a military attack. So they're thinking that maybe there's a message that this ghost is bringing for them so that they may be aware of what's coming to Denmark. Perhaps a military attack because the ghost is dressed in armor, in his full armor. He recounts the story of King Hamlet's conquest of certain lands once belonging to Norway, saying that for Tinbras, the young prince of Norway now seeks to reconquer those forfeited lands. So they think that because young Prince of Norway, Fortinbras, wants to come and fight them, perhaps the ghost has come to warn them about that. The ghost materializes for a second time, and Horatio tries to speak to it. The ghost remains silent, however, and disappears again just as the cock crows at the first hint of dawn. Horatio suggests that they tell Prince Hamlet, the dead king's son, about the apparition. He believes that though the ghost did not speak to him, if it is really the ghost of King Hamlet, it will not refuse to speak to his beloved son. Act 1, Scene 2. The morning after Horatio and the guardsmen see the ghost, King Claudius gives a speech to his courtiers, explaining his recent marriage to Gertrude, his brother's widow, and the mother of Prince Hamlet. He mentions that young Fortinbras has written to him rashly demanding the surrender of the lands King Hamlet won from Fortinbras' father, and dispatches Cornelius and Voltimand with a message for the King of Norway, Fortinbras' elderly uncle. Claudius turns to Lytus, the son of the Lord Chamberlain Polonius. Lytus expresses his desire to return to France, where he was staying before his return to Denmark for Claudius's coronation. Polonius gives his son permission, and Claudius jovially grants Lytus his consent as well. In Scene 2, Prince Hamlet is the only one who's still dressed in black clothes, as he's the only one who is still mourning the death of his father. King Claudius asks him why the clouds still hang upon him. His mother Gertrude urges him to cast off his knightly color, but he replies bitterly that his inner sorrow is so great that his dour appearance is merely a poor mirror of it. It means that the clothes that he's wearing can't even begin to show how bad he feels about the death of his father. Then Claudius, acting like his father, says to Hamlet, he tells him that all fathers die and all sons must lose their fathers. And when a son loses a father, he is duty bound to mourn. But to mourn for too long is unmanly and inappropriate. He reminds him that his father had a father whose father died, and the father and his grandfather also had a father who died, and just like that. But to mourn for a long time is not manly. He urges Hamlet to think of him as a father and reminds him that he stands in line to succeed the throne of Denmark once Claudius dies. With this in mind, Claudius says that he does not wish for Hamlet to return to school at Wittenberg, where he had been studying before his father's death, as Hamlet has asked to go. Gertrude echoes her husband, professing a desire for Hamlet to remain close to her. Hamlet agrees stiffly to obey her. Claudius claims to be so pleased by Hamlet's decision to stay that he will celebrate with festivities and cannon fire, an old custom called the King's Rouse. Ordering Gertrude to follow him, he escorts her from the room and the court follows him. The one who is left in the room is Hamlet by himself. Alone, Hamlet exclaims that he wishes he could die, that he could evaporate and cease to exist. He wishes bitterly that God had not made suicide a sin. He is anguished and laments his father's death and his mother's hasty marriage to his uncle. He remembers how deeply in love his parents seemed, and he curses the thought that now, not yet 2 months after his father's death, his mother has married his father's far inferior brother. Hamlet quiets Suddenly, as Horatio strides into the room, followed by Marcellus and Bernardo. Horatio was a close friend of Hamlet at the university in Wittenberg, and Hamlet, happy to see him, asks him why he has left the school to travel to Denmark. Horatio says that he came to see King Hamlet's funeral, to which Hamlet curtly replies that Horatio came to see his mother's wedding. Horatio agrees that the one followed closely on the heels of the other. He then tells Hamlet that he, Marcellus, and Bernardo have seen what appears to be his father's ghost. Stunned, Hamlet agrees to keep watch with them that night, in the hope that he will be able to speak to the apparition. Scene 3. In Polonius's house, Lytus prepares to leave for France, as he has been given permission by his father and the king. Bidding his sister Ophelia farewell, he cautions her against falling in love with Hamlet, who is, according to Lytus, too far above her by birth to be able to love her honorably. Since Hamlet is responsible not only for his own feelings but for his position in the state, it may be impossible for him to marry her. Ophelia agrees to keep Lytus's advice as a watchman close to her heart, but urges him not to give her advice that he does not practice himself. While Lytus and Ophelia are talking, Polonius enters to bid his son farewell. He gives him a great deal of advice about how to behave with integrity and practicality when he gets back to school in France. Lytus leaves, bidding farewell to Ophelia once more. Alone with his daughter, Polonius asks Ophelia what Lytus told her before he left. Ophelia says that it was something touching the Lord Hamlet. Polonius asks her about her relationship with Hamlet. She tells him that Hamlet claims to love her. Polonius sternly echoes Lytus's advice and forbids Ophelia to associate with Hamlet anymore. He tells her that Hamlet has deceived her in swearing his love, and that she should see through his false vows and rebuff his affections. Ophelia pledges to obey. Scene 4, Act 1. It is now at night. Hamlet keeps watch outside the castle of Elsinore with Horatio and Marcellus. They are waiting in the cold for the ghost to appear. The ghost appears, and Hamlet calls out to it. The ghost beckons Hamlet to follow it out into the night. His companions urge him not to follow, begging him to consider that the ghost might lead him toward harm. He follows after the apparition and disappears into the darkness. Horatio and Marcella, stunned, declare that the event bodes ill for the nation. Horatio and Marcellus follow after Hamlet and the ghost. Scene 5 of Act 1. In the darkness, the ghost speaks to Hamlet, claiming to be his father's spirit, come to rouse Hamlet to revenge his death, a foul and most unnatural murder. Hamlet is appalled at the revelation that his father has been murdered, and the ghost tells him that as he slept in his garden, a villain poured poison into his ear, the very villain who now wears his crown, Claudius. Hamlet's worst fears about his uncles are confirmed. "Oh, my prophetic soul," he cries. The ghost exhorts Hamlet to seek revenge, telling him that Claudius has corrupted Denmark and corrupted Gertrude, having taken her from the pure love of her first marriage and seduced her in the foul lust of their incestuous union. But the ghost urges Hamlet not to act against his mother in any way, telling him to leave her to heaven and to the pangs of her own conscience. So the only person that Hamlet has to act against is his uncle Claudius. His mother is left to God to deal with and to her own conscience for what she has done. As dawn breaks, the ghost disappears. Hamlet swears to remember and obey the ghost. Horatio and Marcellus arrive upon the scene and frantically ask Hamlet what has happened. He refuses to tell them and insists that they swear upon his sword not to reveal what they have seen. He tells them further that he may pretend to be a madman, and he makes them swear not to give the slightest hint that they know anything about his motives. Remember that he's going to pretend to be a madman to try and catch Claudius out. 3 times the ghost voice echoes from beneath the ground, proclaiming, "Swear." Horatio and Marcellus take the oath upon Hamlet's sword that they will not reveal what they have seen. Act 2, Scene 1. Polonius dispatches his servant Reynaldo to France with money and written notes for Lytus. As Reynaldo leaves, Ophelia enters, visibly upset. She tells Polonius that Hamlet, unkept and wild-eyed, has accosted her. Hamlet grabbed her, held her, and sighed heavily, but did not speak to her. Polonius says that Hamlet must be mad with his love for Ophelia, for she has distanced herself from him ever since Polonius ordered her to do so. Polonius speculates that this lovesickness might be the cause of Hamlet's moodiness, and he hurries out to tell Claudius of his idea. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, 2 of Hamlet's friends from Wittenberg, arrive. They've been summoned by the king and queen because of their concern for Hamlet. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern agree to investigate. The ambassadors to Norway return and inform the king that there will be no war against Denmark, but that Norway does want to travel through Denmark to attack Poland. Polonius declares that the prince is mad with love for Ophelia. He shows the king and queen letters and love poems Hamlet has given to Ophelia and proposes a plan to test his theory. Hamlet often walks alone through the lobby of the castle, and at such a time they could hide behind an arras, a curtain or wall hanging, while Ophelia confronts Hamlet, allowing them to see for themselves whether Hamlet's madness really emanates from his love for her. The king declares that they will try the plan. Gertrude notices that Hamlet is approaching, reading from a book as he walks, and Polonius says that he will speak to the prince. Polonius attempts to talk with Hamlet, who appears insane. He calls the old man a fishmonger and answers his questions irrationally. But many of Hamlet's seemingly lunatic statements hide barbed observations about Polonius' pomposity and his old age. As Polonius leaves, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern enter, and Hamlet seems pleased to see them. They discuss Hamlet's unhappiness about recent affairs in Denmark. Hamlet asks why they have come. Sheepishly, the 2 men claim they have come merely to visit Hamlet, but he sternly declares that he knows that the king and queen sent for them. They confess this to be true, and Hamlet says that he knows why, because he has lost all of his joy and descended into a state of melancholy in which everything and everyone appears sterile and worthless. Rosencrantz smiles and says he wonders how Hamlet will receive a theatrical troupe that is currently traveling toward the castle. He's mad only some of the time, and at other times is sane. Hamlet welcomes them and entreats one of them to give him a speech about the fall of Troy and the death of the Trojan king and queen, Priam and Hecuba, in a sort of audition. He announces that the next night they will hear the Medal of Gonzago performed with an additional short speech that he will write himself. He resolves to devise a trap for Claudius, forcing the king to watch a play whose plot closely resembles the murder of Hamlet's father. If the king is guilty, he thinks, he will surely show some visible sign of guilt when he sees his scene reenacted on stage. Then Hamlet reasons he will obtain definite proof of Claudius's guilt. The play's the thing, he declares, wherein I'll catch the conscience of the king. Act 3, Scene 1. Claudius and Gertrude discuss Hamlet's behavior with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, who have been unable to learn the cause of Hamlet's melancholy and madness. They tell the king and queen about Hamlet's enthusiasm for the players or actors that have arrived in Elsinore Castle. Gertrude and Claudius agree that they will see the play that evening. Claudius and Polonius intend to spy on Hamlet's confrontation with Ophelia. Polonius directs Ophelia to walk around the lobby, and he hears Hamlet coming, and he and the king hide. Hamlet enters, speaking thoughtfully and agonizingly to himself about the question of whether to commit suicide to end the pain of experience. He sees Ophelia approaching. Having received her orders from Polonius, she tells him that she wishes to return the tokens of love he has given her. He denies having given her anything and laments the dishonesty of beauty and claims both to have loved Ophelia once and never to have loved her at all. He criticizes women for making men behave like monsters and for contributing to the world's dishonesty by painting their faces to appear more beautiful than they are. Working himself into a rage, he denounces Ophelia, women, and humankind in general, saying that he wishes to end all marriages. As he storms out, Ophelia mourns the noble mind that has now lapsed into apparent madness. The king and Polonius emerge from behind the tapestry. Claudius says that Hamlet's strange behavior has clearly not been caused by love for Ophelia, and that his speech does not seem like the speech of insanity. He declares that he will send Hamlet to England in the hope that a change of scenery might help him get over his trouble. Polonius agrees that this is a good idea, but he still believes that Hamlet's agitation comes from loving Ophelia. He asks Claudius to send Hamlet to Gertrude's chamber after the play, where Polonius can hide again and watch unseen. He hopes to learn whether Hamlet is really mad with love. Act 3, Scene 2. That evening in the castle hall, now doubling as a theatre, Hamlet anxiously lectures the players on how to act the parts he has written for them. Horatio enters, and Hamlet, pleased to see him, praises him heartily, expressing his affection for and high opinion of Horatio's mind and manner, especially Horatio's qualities of self-control and reserve. Having told Horatio what he learned from the ghost, that Claudius murdered his father, he now asks him to watch Claudius carefully during the play so that they might compare their impressions of his behavior afterward. Horatio agrees, saying that if Claudius shows any signs of guilt, he will detract them. The players enter and act out a brief silent version of the play called the Dumb Show. In the Dumb Show, a king and queen display their love. The queen leaves the king to sleep, and while he's sleeping, a man murders him by pouring poison into his ear. The murderer tries to seduce the queen, who gradually accepts his advances. When the murderer pours the poison into the sleeping king's ear, Claudius rises and cries out for light. Chaos ensues as the play comes to a sudden halt. The torches are lit, and the king flees the room, followed by the audience. When the scene quiets, Hamlet is left alone with Horatio. Hamlet and Horatio agree that the king's behavior was telling. Now extremely excited, Hamlet continues to act frantic and scatterbrained, speaking glibly and inventing little poems. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern arrive to tell Hamlet that he's wanted in his mother's chambers. Polonius enters to escort Hamlet to the queen. Hamlet says he will go to her in a moment and ask for a moment alone. He steels himself to speak to his mother, resolving to be brutally honest with her, but not to lose control of himself. I'll speak daggers to her, but use none, meaning that he would speak strongly with her. Badly shaken by the play and now considering Hamlet's madness to be dangerous, Claudius asks Rosencrantz and Guildenstern to escort Hamlet on a voyage to England and to depart immediately. They agree and leave to make preparations. Polonius enters and reminds the king of his plan to hide in Gertrude's room and observe Hamlet's confrontation with her. He promises to tell Claudius all that he learns. When Polonius leaves, the king is alone, and he immediately expresses his guilt and grief over his sin. He longs to ask for forgiveness, but says that he is unprepared to give up that which he gained by committing the murder, namely the crown and the queen. He falls to his knees and begins to pray. Hamlet slips quietly into the room and steels himself to killing the unseeing Claudius. It occurs to him that if he kills Claudius while he's praying, he will end the king's life at the moment when he was seeking forgiveness for his sins, sending Claudius' soul to heaven. This is hardly an adequate revenge, Hamlet thinks, especially since Claudius, by killing Hamlet's father before he had time to make his last confession, ensured that his brother would not go to heaven. Hamlet decides to wait, resolving to kill Claudius when the king is sinning, when he's either drunk, angry, or lustful, and he leaves. Act 3, Scene 4. In Gertrude's chamber, the queen and Polonius wait for Hamlet's arrival. Polonius plans to hide in order to eavesdrop on Gertrude's confrontation with her son in the hope that doing so will enable him to determine the cause of Hamlet's bizarre and threatening behavior. Hamlet storms into the room and asks his mother why she has sent for him. She says that she has offended his father, meaning his stepfather Claudius, referring to the play that had just happened. He interrupts her and says that she has offended his father, meaning the dead king Hamlet, by marrying Claudius. Hamlet accosts her with an almost violent intensity and declares his intention to make her fully aware of her sin. And what is his intention? It is to avenge his father's death. Fearing for her life, Gertrude cries out from behind the arras. Polonius calls out for help. Hamlet, realizing that someone is behind the arras, draws his sword and stabs it through the tapestry, killing the unseen Polonius. Gertrude asks what Hamlet has done. The queen says his action was a rash and bloody deed, and Hamlet replies that it was almost as rash and bloody as murdering a king and marrying his brother. Disbelieving, the queen exclaims, "As kill a king?" And Hamlet replies that she heard him correctly. Hamlet lifts the arras and arras the curtain and discovers Polonius's body. He bids the old man farewell, calling him an intruding fool. He turns to his mother, declaring that he will wring her heart. He shows her a picture of the dead king and a picture of the current king, bitterly comments on the superiority of his father to his uncle, and asks her furiously what has driven her to marry a rotten man such as Claudius. She pleads with him to stop, saying that he has turned her eyes onto her soul and she does not like what she sees there, meaning that she's feeling guilty now. Hamlet continues to denounce her and rail against Claudius until suddenly the ghost of his father again appears before him. Hamlet speaks to the apparition, but Gertrude is unable to see it and believes him to be mad. The ghost comes to remind Hamlet that he has not yet killed Claudius and must achieve his revenge. Hamlet describes the ghost, but Gertrude sees nothing, and in a moment the ghost disappears. Hamlet tries desperately to convince Gertrude that he's not mad, but has merely pretended to be mad all along, and he urges her to leave Claudius and regain her good conscience. He urges her as well not to reveal to Claudius that his madness has been an act. Gertrude agrees to keep his secret. He bids her good night and leaves, dragging Polonius's body behind him. Hamlet leaves his mother's room. Act 4, Scene 1. Gertrude hurries to Claudius. She tells Claudius about her encounter with Hamlet. She says that he is as mad as the sea during a violent storm. She also tells Claudius that Hamlet has killed Polonius. Claudius wonders aloud how he'll be able to handle this public crisis without damaging his hold on Denmark. He tells Gertrude that they must ship Hamlet to England at once and find a way to explain Hamlet's misdeed to the court and to the people. He calls Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, tells them about the murder, and sends them to find Hamlet. Act 4, Scene 2. Elsewhere in Elsinore, Hamlet has just finished disposing of Polonius's body. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern appear and ask what he has done with the body. Hamlet refuses to give them a straight answer. At last he agrees to allow Rosencrantz and Guildenstern to escort him to Claudius. Act 4, Scene 3. The king tells of Polonius's death and his intention to send Hamlet to England. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern appear with Hamlet, who is under guard. Hamlet reveals that Polonius's body is under the stairs near the castle lobby. The king tells Hamlet that he must leave at once for England. Claudius sends Rosencrantz and Guildenstern to ensure that he boards the ship at once. Claudius hopes that England will obey the sealed orders he has sent with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. The orders call for Prince Hamlet to be put to death when he arrives in England. Act 4, Scene 4. On a nearby plain in Denmark, young Prince Fortinbras marches at the head of his army, traveling through Denmark on the way to attack Poland. Fortinbras orders his captain to go and ask the King of Denmark for permission to travel through his lands. On his way, the captain encounters Hamlet, Rosencrantz, and Guildenstern on their way to the ship bound for England. Hamlet is amazed that men would fight over a piece of worthless ground when there are other more pressing things that blood could be spilled over. Disgusted with himself for having failed to gain his revenge on Claudius, Hamlet declares that from this moment on, his thoughts will be bloody. Act 4, Scene 5. Gertrude and Horatio discuss Ophelia. Gertrude does not wish to see the girl, but Horatio says that Ophelia should be pitied, explaining that her grief has made her disordered and incoherent. Ophelia enters wearing flowers and singing strange songs. She seems to have gone mad. Claudius enters and hears Ophelia's ravings. He also mentions that Lytus has secretly sailed back from France. Act 4, Scene 5. Noise echoes from somewhere in the castle. Claudius calls for his guards, and a gentleman enters to warn the king that Lytus has come with a mob of commoners. Lytus storms into the hall, wanting to avenge his father's death. Claudius attempts to soothe him by acknowledging that Polonius is dead. Gertrude nervously adds that Claudius is innocent in it. Ophelia enters, obviously insane. Lytus plunges again into rage. Claudius claims that he's not responsible for Polonius' death and says that Lytus' desire for revenge is noble so long as he seeks revenge upon the proper person. Claudius convinces Lytus to hear his version of events, which he says will answer all his questions, and Lytus agrees. Act 4, Scene 6. In another part of the castle, Horatio is introduced to a pair of sailors bearing a letter for him from Hamlet. In the letter, Hamlet says that his ship was captured by pirates who have returned him to Denmark. He asks Horatio to escort the sailors to the king and queen. They've messages for them as well. He also says that he has much to tell of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. Horatio takes the sailors to the king and then follows them to find Hamlet, who is in the countryside near the castle. Act 4, Scene 7. Whilst Horatio speaks to the sailors, Claudius and a calmer Lytus discuss Polonius's death. Claudius explains that he acted as he did because both the common people and the queen love Hamlet very much. A messenger enters with a letter from Hamlet to Claudius, which tells the king that Hamlet will return tomorrow. Lytus is pleased that Hamlet has come back to Denmark, since it means that he will be revenged sooner. Claudius agrees that Lytus deserves to be revenged, and he encourages Lytus to kill Hamlet, because Hamlet's erratic behavior has made him a threat to Claudius' reign. The king begins to think of a way for Lytus to ensure his revenge without creating any appearance of foul play. Hamlet has been jealous in the past of Lytus' skill with the sword. He was praised by a Frenchman who had seen him fighting. The king thinks that if Hamlet could be tempted into a duel with Lytus, it might provide Lytus with a chance to kill him. Lytus agrees and they settle on the plan. Lytus will use a sharpened sword rather than the customary dull fencing blade. Lytus also proposes to poison his sword so that even a scratch from it will kill Hamlet. The king has a backup plan as well, proposing that if Hamlet succeeds in the duel, Claudius will offer him a poisoned cup of wine to drink from in celebration. Gertrude enters with tragic news. Ophelia, mad with grief, has drowned in the river. Upset to have lost his sister so soon after his father's death, Lytus flees the room. Act 5, Scene 1. In the churchyard, two grave diggers shovel out a grave for Ophelia. They argue whether Ophelia should be buried in the churchyard, since her death looks like a suicide. According to religious doctrine, suicides may not receive a Christian burial. Hamlet and Horatio enter at a distance and watch the grave diggers at work. Hamlet looks with wonder at the skulls they excavate to make room for the fresh grave and speculates darkly about what occupations the owners of these skulls served in life. The grave digger, who does not recognize Hamlet as the prince, tells him that he has been a grave digger since King Hamlet defeated the elder Fortinbras in battle, the very day on which young Prince Hamlet was born. Hamlet picks up a skull, and the grave digger tells him that the skull belonged to Yorick, King Hamlet's jester. Hamlet tells Horatio that as a child he knew Yorick and is appalled at the sight of the skull. Suddenly, the funeral procession for Ophelia enters the churchyard, including Claudius, Gertrude, Lytus, and many mourning courtiers. Hamlet wonders who has died, notices that the funeral rites seem maimed, indicating that the dead man or woman took his or her own life. He and Horatio hide as the procession approaches the grave. As Ophelia is laid in the earth, Hamlet realizes it is she who has died. Lytus jumps into the grave to hold his sister. Grief-stricken and outraged, Hamlet bursts upon the company, declaring in agonized fury his own love for Ophelia. He leaps into the grave and fights with Lytus. The combatants are pulled apart by the funeral company. Gertrude and Claudius declare that Hamlet is mad. Hamlet storms off, and Horatio follows. The king urges Lytus to be patient and to remember their plan for revenge. Act 5, Scene 2. The next day at Elsinore Castle, Hamlet tells Horatio how he plotted to overcome Claudius' scheme to have him murdered in England. He replaced the sealed letter carried by the unsuspecting Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, which called for Hamlet's execution, with one calling for the execution of the bearers of the letter, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern themselves. He feels sorry for having behaved with such hostility towards Lytus. In Lytus' desire to avenge his father's death, he says he sees the mirror image of his own desire and he promises to seek Lytus' good favor. Osric has come to tell them that Claudius wants Hamlet to fence with Lytus, and that the king has made a wager with Lytus that Hamlet will win. A lord enters and asks Hamlet if he's ready to come to the match, as the king and queen are expecting him. Against Horatio's advice, Hamlet agrees to fight. The court marches into the hall, and Hamlet asks Lytus for forgiveness, claiming that it was his madness and not his own will that murdered Polonius. Lytus says that he will not forgive Hamlet. In the meantime, he says he will accept Hamlet's offer of love. Hamlet and Lytus select their foils, blunted swords used in fencing. And the king says that if Hamlet wins the first or second hit, he will drink to Hamlet's health. Then throw into the cup a valuable gem. A valuable gem will be a precious stone, eh? Actually, poison. He's going to be throwing in poison, but Hamlet is going to be thinking that it's a valuable or precious stone. And give the wine to Hamlet. The duel begins. Hamlet strikes Lytus, but declines to drink from the cup, saying that he will play another hit first. He hits Lytus again, and Gertrude rises to drink from the cup. The king tells her not to drink, but she does so anyway. Lytus remarks under his breath that to wound Hamlet with a poisoned sword is almost against his conscience. But they fight again, and Lytus scores a hit against Hamlet, drawing blood. Scuffling, they manage to exchange swords, and Hamlet wounds Lytus with Lytus's own blade. The queen falls. Lytus, poisoned by his own sword, declares, "I'm justly killed with my own treachery." The queen mourns that the cup must have been poisoned, calls out to Hamlet, and dies. Lytus tells Hamlet that he too has been slain by his own poisoned sword, and that the king is to blame both for the poison on the sword and for the poison in the cup. Hamlet runs Claudius through with the poisoned sword and forces him to drink down the rest of the poisoned wine. Claudius dies, crying out for help. Hamlet tells Horatio that he is dying, and exchanges a last forgiveness with Lytus, who dies after absolving Hamlet of guilt. The sound of marching echoes through the hall, and a shot rings out nearby. Hamlet says that he wishes Fortinbras to be made king of Denmark. Then he dies. Fortinbras marches into the room, accompanied by the English ambassadors, who announce that Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. Horatio says that he will tell everyone assembled the story that led to the gruesome scene now on display. Fortinbras orders for Hamlet to be carried away like a soldier. And that is the end of the play of Hamlet.